Hey, I know there are a bunch of you here right now who your first real dive into anything having to do with the Bible is just these last 10 episodes we've done together on the book of John. And it's all kind of brand new. And there's been a few references here and there you've probably caught where you're like, I don't know what that means. I haven't been around this before. That is new to me. Maybe you went and Googled it. Maybe you're just waiting until later in the podcast to see how that all plays out. Don't worry. You're going to get a really good look at the whole Bible from just this one book of John, because as you're already seeing, the language in John kind of reaches in all directions, all out and about the Bible. And we're going to follow every single one of those rabbit trails that we notice. Still, I could see how this would be a little bit overwhelming. And so before I tear into stuff today, let me just give you the lightning fast rundown on how the New Testament is built for those of you who are brand new. The first four books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and our favorite book this season, John, are called the four Gospels. They tell, once again, the story of Jesus, his teachings, his life, his death, his resurrection. And then after those four books, you get one more New Testament history book, one more book that is story, that is narrative. And that is the book of Acts. Not acts like you would swing to chop a tree, but acts like I took action. I think the long name of this book back in the day was the Acts of the Apostles. It's the sequel to the Gospel of Luke, and it tracks the story of what the disciples did after Jesus was resurrected and went back to heaven, to the right hand of the Father. And the first half of the book of Acts covers a lot of those initial disciples who we know, like John and Peter and that crowd. But then in the second half of Acts, we pick up with a guy who used to persecute Christians, but flips teams and becomes like the chief champion of Christianity and travels all around the world spreading the message of Jesus. And this guy is the Apostle Paul, who you've probably heard of. Then after Acts, the rest of the New Testament is letters, from Romans all the way up to 2 Thessalonians. These letters all have geography names. Every book of the Bible that has a geography name, by the way, is right here between Romans and 2 Thessalonians. These books mostly are shorter, and you'll figure out really quick as you're reading through the Bible that these are old-timey letters written from the Apostle Paul to Christians in different areas where they had churches. Then after that, you get four short letters in a row that are addressed specifically to individuals, not regions or churches. You get 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. And whoever's name is on those letters, that's who the letter was written to. Then after that, you get the hard to categorize book of Hebrews because we don't know who wrote it. It is a dense, impressive theological treatise. Maybe it was written by Paul. Maybe it was written by somebody else. We don't know the exact audience, but it looks like it was written to Jewish Christians. Then after that, you get what some people call the general letters or the general epistles. Epistle is the fancy word for letters. And these are the letters that were written by key disciples to the church in general. Peter writes two of them, 1st and 2nd Peter. John, our pal, the guy we're following with this season, he writes 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. 2nd and 3rd John are tiny, by the way, but all three of them, we'll cover them at some point in the course of this season. They sound a lot like John, and a lot of the same themes carry through in those three general epistles of John. So we got the general epistles of 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Then there's one more little micro letter called Jude, which was probably written by a half-brother of Jesus. And then the end of the whole Bible, it's the summary of all of history and all of theology. In the end, the good guys win, the curse is defeated, sin is defeated, God is glorified. It's fantastic, even if it's a little bit heady. That book is called Revelation. So there's your quick rundown of how the New Testament works. So now, even if you are brand new here and only 10 episodes, that is 2 weeks, into familiarizing yourself with the Bible, you are now up to speed, and you're going to know a little bit more what we're talking about when I say that we're going to go and look at something in the book of Acts. Remember, that's the Acts of the Apostles. And in Acts 17, Paul, that guy who carried the message of Jesus all around the Mediterranean world, all the way to Rome, he is in Athens, headquarters of Greekism. Remember, we've been talking about three guys, particularly one, Plato, who are from Athens. It was hundreds of years before the events described in the book of Acts, but during the golden age of philosophy in Athens, you had Socrates, who wrote nothing, Plato, his student, who wrote a whole bunch of stuff about what Socrates said and did, and then Aristotle, who was Plato's student, and Aristotle, in his old age, went on to be the personal tutor of Alexander the Great. So 3 guys in a row, 4 guys in a row, depending on how you count it, who were mega geniuses and absolutely changed the world. Because of that, Athens is kind of the place in the ancient world that everybody would associate with, well, the big Greek philosophical ideas, including ideas you and I have been talking about lately, like the Logos, which in our English translations is translated as capital W word. John is, of course, using that as a stand-in for Jesus. Jesus is the Logos. He is the architect of the grand master plan of all design, and Jesus is personal. Well, in Acts 17, Paul is taking the message of Jesus, the Logos, on the road to Athens, right into the belly of the philosophical beast. These people knew they were brilliant. They knew they were descended from a brilliant tradition, and they like to get together on this great big rock. It's kind of like Crowheart Butte, if you've ever driven between Lander and DuBois, Wyoming. Why am I using that example? That's going to work for like 10 of you. Literally. And Matthew Fox, star of J.J. Abrams' Lost. Look it up. He's from Crowheart. It's the craziest thing ever. I don't know, whatever. Just picture any bluff, whatever bluff or butte there is wherever you live. It's like that. There's a big rock in the middle. It's called the Hill of Ares or Mars Hill. The Acropolis is just above this. That is the high city. And there's this ledge right there where people would get together and they would talk shop about philosophy. And they'd been doing so since forever. I've been lucky enough to travel there with one of my buddies. And I just sat there and thought, dang, ancient Athenian philosophy happened here. How many people who are ultra famous stood in this place? It's just wild. But also, Bible happened here. What Bible? Well, Acts 17. So Paul goes into Athens and he's like, I'm just going to go up there to where they talk shop about ideas and have for hundreds of years, dating back to even before Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. I'm going to be like, I got an idea for y'all. The idea is Jesus. You all seem really interested in a grand master plan that explains everything. I'll tell you who it is. It's Jesus, and this is how he handles it. It says, Paul then, this is Acts 17:22, stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious, for as I walked around and observed your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, To an Unknown God. Now, what you worship is something unknown, I'm going to proclaim to you. He goes on, The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by hands. And he's not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. I mean, you hear the life and breath and that. I'm tying all of this back in, obviously, to John and what we're working on, and I'm going to tie it back into the stuff at the beginning of John. You can kind of catch all of that right here as well. From one man, he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by man's design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, for he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to all men by raising him from the dead. And then the way the story works out, some people hear it and they're like, oh, resurrection? Oh, okie dokie. And then we don't believe you. And then other people are like, yeah, dang, okay, well, that's pretty interesting. That would be big if true. I would like to hear you again on that subject. And at the end of Acts 17, it even says that a few men became followers of Paul and believed. Among them was Dionysius, a member of the Areopagus, also a woman named Damaris, and a number of others. So that's pretty cool. I mean, it kind of worked. Paul took a real big swing there, and then he left Athens and he traveled to Corinth. Okay, you're smart. You know what we've been working on for the previous 10 episodes over in John, and it is this idea that Jesus is the completion, the fulfillment, the better-thanification of these Greek ideas about where existence came from. Jesus is the completion, but even more than the Greeks could have imagined, of the concept of the Logos. He's light, he's life, he's personal, he's a being, he's still involved and holding it together. He made existence out of non-existence. He isn't an agent in a pantheon of gods. He is God, and he came here in the flesh not so long ago. Now, to the best of my knowledge, John and Paul only met up once. There's a meeting in Jerusalem in Acts chapter 15, and I don't think it actually lists John as having been there with Paul at that meeting, but over in Galatians, Paul indicates that he was at that meeting and that John signed off on all the stuff that Paul was saying about the non-Jews who were hearing the message of Jesus and responding. So how much did John and Paul inform each other, and how much did they put their heads together when they were hanging out in Jerusalem to be like, we got to talk about this, dude. We got to talk about how we make this make sense to Greek people. Maybe they talked about it a lot. Maybe they didn't talk about it very much at all. But either way, John 1 and Acts 17 are two of the places that really stand out, in my mind at least, where in the New Testament, followers of Jesus look toward Greek thought and say, yeah, you guys are maybe a tiny bit onto something. Let me round this out. Let me give you a fuller understanding of what you were groping around in the darkness and kind of feeling and sort of describing. Let me cast light on it and explain to you what this truest, realest thing is that you were just getting a little bit of a sense of on your own. I began this episode talking specifically with people who are brand new to all of this stuff. Welcome. Once again, glad you're here. Glad you're in on all of this. I think you've made a wonderful choice. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. And I want to close this episode talking to the same folks who might be newer to this podcast. From time to time, we will be looking at something in the book of the Bible that the season is about, in this case, John, and I'll see something that sparks my curiosity or, oh yeah, reminds me of something else that I read in some other part of the Bible. Then we're going to do a rabbit trail like today, where we just rabbit trail right on over there and we look at this other part of the Bible and we think about what's going on with that and we compare notes on the two and we're like, there, we learned some stuff and we have fun. And then we'll just go right back to where we were, which in this case is this super interesting, super consequential business here on the front end of John. More about that tomorrow. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.